Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size Balance. I'm here today with Christy Osborne. Hi, Christy.
Hey, Wendy. How are you?
I'm so great. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I know you have an interesting story, but I don't know very much about it. So for anyone who's listening to this podcast, I'm kind of in the dark like you are right now. And I'm really looking forward to the story unfolding. I can tell you that what I do know about Christy is that she's a certified This Naked Mind coach, just like I am, and that she currently lives in the UK, but she is American. And she has her own story of drinking, particularly, I think, focused in kind of being an expat and mummy wine culture life in the UK. And we've got lots of things in common, but I think probably lots of things not in common. I think it's going to be a really good conversation and I'm looking forward to it. So Christy, why don't we start with you just kind of walking me through, like, how did you end up becoming a certified This Naked Mind coach? And I know it's probably a long story and that's fine. Take your time. This is just a casual conversation. But if you want to maybe just start at like when it started to feel like alcohol was problematic for you and what was going on in your life then.
Yeah, sure. So do you want me to start like when it got like a little out of hand, so to speak, for me, or kind of go back to how it started and how it changed?
I think, whatever you think is going to be helpful for anyone listening.
Yeah.
I often find like a lot of the people I talk to, and this is certainly my story, like just kind of had a sort of typical drinking, college experience and then university, a post-university kind of experience. And then I think for me, and it sounds like maybe a bit for you as well, things really started to shift once I had kids and I was drinking as a mother. But if there's something that happened before that you feel like is interesting and relevant, go for it. I don't care where you start.
Yeah.
Wherever feels right.
No, like it's exactly like you said. I had the typical, really started drinking in college, went to USC in California, was in a sorority, like obviously tons and tons of alcohol and drinking going on in college, but never really felt like I really liked being in control. Right. So I never wanted to get too out of control. I was always the one bringing home the sorority sister, holding back the hair, the whole thing, like didn't like getting out of control. And I think actually for me, I've obviously thought about a lot about this doing the work that we do. It definitely ramped up in stages. Right. So, and for different reasons, as you said, I think the first kind of ramp up for me was I did study abroad when I was in college. And so it was a huge connector, right? A way to meet new people. I studied abroad here in the UK in college, law school, and then ended up moving here. And it's a huge drinking culture over here. So there was definitely a shift when I studied abroad. And then after college, went to law school. And with the stress of law school, drinking, it was definitely for the stress relief. It was, again, for connection. Law school was where I met my husband. Wine was a huge part of like our love story. And we became like ridiculous wine snobs, which I now laugh about, but I thought it was really important back then. Wine was definitely a part of kind of like meeting and falling in love with my now husband. But yeah, as you mentioned, it was having kids, but definitely living abroad without any family here, having kids. And my son, who is my second child, he's now 10, was a very difficult delivery. He was very, very early. He had to go in the NICU. And I had really bad postpartum after him. And funny story, I had a baby nurse that was helping me because, again, like no family, no friends. I didn't know anybody having kids at that time. And I remember her giving me a lecture about not drinking because she didn't want to have like the wine obviously end up in the breast milk. So she was like watching me like a hawk. So I remember, and like I'm like partially ashamed to say this, but I've dealt with it, is like I was hiding wine in my closet, in my room from the baby nurse. Because I just like, that was the coping mechanism, right? Like that was the way that I was like treating myself for getting through the hard days and everything like that. And so, yeah, definitely ramped up when I had kids. As I said, it is the way with all moms. I think that we perpetuate on each other that we're supposed to cope, right, with motherhood. And then my mom passed away, and that was the catalyst, I guess, for the increase in my drinking. I'll do a quick like backstory on that. So she and I were really, really close always growing up, and she was never a drinker. And my dad kind of did, but I didn't have one of these experiences where I remember like a ton of alcohol growing up, because my mom never drank, and we were very, very close. Like I would speak to her daily while at college, daily while in university, and even like daily when I moved over here to London. And then she started drinking kind of like in my early 30s and maybe late 20s, early 30s. And it just changed her as a person. And so I saw this complete shift in her, and it was a huge shift in our relationship. And I kind of like, in a really weird way, like not in a weird way, I lost her before I lost her, essentially. I remember like actually a friend of hers saying to me, I'll never forget it. I was standing in this woman's kitchen, and she's like, well, maybe this is a good thing that you're going through this, because you guys were always too close. And I remember thinking that I don't know, like it just didn't feel good at all. And so she was dealing with a lot of her own kind of trauma, and it came out when she was drinking. And so it completely like fractured our relationship. And when she passed away, we were at this really like precarious point where like I was never quite sure if I was like in her good books or in her bad books. And yeah, like it was just really, really difficult. And I'm the oldest daughter of two boys. And as any like daughter with brothers knows, like we take on the responsibility, right? So I went home to LA. I planned the funeral. I wrote the obituary. I did all the things like by myself. And in the middle of all this, come to find out that she's like tried to like write me out of her will, like crazy stuff. Like this is my best friend who like went from like my like very closest like ally to literally trying to write me out of her will. So it was just like a lot of things to handle. And I handled it with alcohol. I handled it all with alcohol. And I just remember like, I really remember being in so much pain and thinking to myself, like, if I could just get to lunch, like if I can get to a lunch, like, you know, meeting a girlfriend or whatever, I can have that wine and I will feel better. I remember that like as a neon sign in my head of like, if I can just get to noon, I will feel better because I'll have the wine. Mm-hmm. And so that went on like that for like 2 years. And I just, you know, all the shame and the guilt from being a really bad mom, getting into ridiculous fights with my husband that like I didn't remember, and just like not being the person that I wanted to be. Like we talk a lot in our coaching, right, about showing up as our authentic selves. And I just was not showing up as the person that I was. I wasn't dependable. I wasn't being honest. I wasn't putting my family first. All these things that were really important to me, I was doing the opposite of. And so on the 2-year anniversary of her death, I was in bed with a hangover and feeling horrendous. And the kids were at school. My husband was at work. And I remember like scrolling through my Instagram of like the past 2 years, like looking at like how glossy and pretty and awesome, like I had portrayed this life. I was a commentator for Meghan and Harry's like royal wedding, like several times. I was on the news over here because they wanted like a peppy American to commentate on like the UK getting an American princess. So like they were having me on as a regular. And I just was looking at all this stuff and the travel. And I was like, it's just fake. It's not even, it looks really shiny, but I'm in bed right now and I can't even like lift my head off the pillow. And I feel so horrible. And it just it's not matching. Right. So yeah, so I'm a Christian and I was in this like, place and I just prayed. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And as I said, it was the anniversary of her death. And I didn't want to like go another 1 or 2 years, like feeling like I had felt that day. And then like a week later, the UK went into total lockdown. And so I joke sometimes that I was like in this like self-imposed rehab where I was like, I decided I didn't want to, like, I needed to give up drinking for a minute and figure out if I could feel better without it. And there was no place to go and no one to see. So I was just like basically trapped. And that's when I found Annie Grace and became obsessed with all of the things of like personal development and ditching alcohol and everything like that. So that led me then to find Scott and apply for the program and get certified. And so, yeah, that's
okay.
That was kind of long-winded, but
no, that's great. I actually want to go back to some stuff in that and hear more about it. I want to, I definitely want to talk about what it was like for you to stop drinking. So it sounds like by the time the pandemic started, you were you drinking daily? Like, can you tell us what that looked like? People always ask that question, which I find it really interesting. Like people ask me that a lot. And I mean, I'm happy to be honest with them, but I'm really, really strongly a believer in the fact that it doesn't really matter how much you drink. All that really matters is how it's making you feel. But I think,
100%.
It does help to give people context around it, because what I've found is that no matter how much we're drinking, the struggles and the joys of becoming alcohol free are the same. Like they're very, very similar. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about what that looked like and then how you did that. So you discovered Annie Grace. What did that look like for you? Did you find the book, This Naked Mind? Did you do the 30-day experiment? Like, and what parts about it were really hard? What was easy? Like maybe kind of tell us more about that. Yeah,
sure. So, I mean, yes, I was drinking daily but it looked different, right? It would be like, okay, a long day, whatever, with the kids. And I was, working still at the time. And I would pour myself a glass of wine when the kids got home from school. And, so sometimes it was like 2 to 3 glasses. And then sometimes it was more, it was always more than I wanted to. And then on nights out, which like I was very much a part of like a big social scene, big group of lots of friends over here. And so it was very much like, then when I would go out, it would be a disaster.
Right. Yeah.
So it looked different, but like to your point of it doesn't matter how much you're drinking, which I like firmly believe in as well. I can look back at my drinking history, so to speak, right, and see how it was getting in the way then, even if it was just 1 or 2 nights a week during law school. I can see how it still affected me in a negative way. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I'm a firm believer. It doesn't matter how much. And it wouldn't matter if it was like 2 glasses or coming in at 2 a.m. Like it was still not making me feel great.
Right. Yeah.
And then how I kind of found Annie Grace and stopped and all that stuff. I actually read Catherine Gray's book first, Unexpected Joy of Being Sober, because a girlfriend had recommended it and I had made fun of her at that time.
Can I stop you for a sec? Were you talking to anybody about how you were feeling about your drink?
No, I was so scared.
Yeah,
the first person I told was my husband, and I remember I was shaking and I was like crying and like choking back, and I was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know if what I'm supposed to do. I just know the only thing I know is I have to stop for right now. And I asked him, I was like, can you please just stop with me until I figure out what this means? And he was like, yeah, of course. But no, I didn't talk. I was so scared. That was the thing, Wendy, that kept me stuck the longest, is the fear of what other people would think, and the fear of friends and what to tell friends, who was going to stick around, who I was going to lose. Like that was my biggest fear for sure.
Okay. Well, let's come back to that. I'm going to make a note because I want to talk about that, like how you did that and how that actually ended up turning out. But because that is a fear that I think keeps so many people stuck in drinking. So we'll definitely come back to that. So your girlfriend gives you the unexpected joy. You must have talked to her a little bit about alcohol for her to pass that on to you.
No, so it was really funny. So this was March. the previous September, we had like a wild summer together, and she was like, I'm going to do a sober September. And I was so mean to her. I have since gone back and apologized, but like, I was so mean to her, and she was reading this book and she's like, I just need a break. And I was like, oh, come on. You're so lame. Come on, blah, blah, blah. So that was just like my first like thing I thought of to do, is because she had mentioned that book.
Okay.
And yeah, but, and then, so that spiraled, right? You know, you go into your Amazon thing, and then Lauren McCowan comes up, and Holly Whitaker and Annie Grace, and the path that we seem to all take. I also I did an online seminar of Alan Carr's that was like a webinar type thing, like a multiple day webinar. So I did that, and I just became obsessed with it, right? It just made so much sense what these people were saying, and the fact that there were people out there doing it, I think was a huge revelation as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm about 4.5 years alcohol free, and I didn't have a lot of those things available.
Yeah.
So Laura and Holly hadn't written their books yet, but they just started this podcast called Home, which I listened to with the two of them together. I don't think it lasted for very long, but they had enough episodes that kept me going. And I found This Naked Mind, the book, the audiobook online, which I've talked about before on this podcast, but I think that was kind of the sort of some kind of intervention by the universe that ended up, in my Audible library when I went in to search for, I think I just was looking for self-help or personal development or something. I don't know how. I definitely wasn't searching for alcohol at that point. So it was interesting that it popped in.
Yeah.
But there wasn't even a 30-day guided alcohol experiment at that point with This Naked Mind. There was just the self-guided course, which I did do. So all of the things you're talking about are books I read, but I read them later. The Unexpected Joy, though, I think it was out, and I did read that, and it was very impactful for me. The idea that there could actually be something better available for me without alcohol was just revelatory to me at the time.
Yeah.
So you found This Naked Mind, you found Alan Carr, you started reading all of this literature. Did you stop when you had that moment where you said, did you stop? And then did you have any periods where you decided to drink again? Did you do any of the kind of mindful drinking? I'm putting that in air quotes that we talk about sometimes in This Naked Mind before you decided to stop, or did you just stop? I just stopped. So that's why I'm asking that question.
Yeah. No, I literally just stopped. And I think it, I don't know. I feel like I was like I feel like I was really lucky in that it happened right pre-pandemic, right? Because also like we were heading into what is known over here as a massive social season. So it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to go to Royal Ascot? How am I going to do that if I'm not drinking? How am I going to go to the whatever, these lunches and teas and all this other BS? Like, how am I going to do it if I'm not drinking? And I was so scared. And then like event after event got canceled. And I was like, okay. And I think just, in that respect, I was lucky because I could get those like days under my belt, dive into the material and become obsessed with learning. And yet, like at that point, even though I didn't go back to like a mindful drinking period, like I obviously can see how that could be super, super valuable. And I never said forever in the beginning, and I know a lot of people like to say, even now, when we're however many years in, I'm never going to say forever. For me, I'm just like, why would I ever?
Yeah. So it's so funny. I was just saying that to a client yesterday. I said like, because she's kind of gotten to this point where she's like, I say that to my clients all the time. Like, you don't need to sit forever, and you just need to commit to whatever the period is you're comfortable committing to. And like we do, we set up a plan and goals and all of that. But she came to the call and she said something like, I know I'm not supposed to think like about forever, but I'm kind of thinking about forever, but like in a really positive, hopeful way.
Right.
That's great.
That's okay.
Like, if you've gotten to a point where it's pretty clear to you, this thing doesn't serve you at all, and it probably never will, and you feel good saying that, then fantastic. I think our point in This Naked Mind is that you certainly don't have to say that.
Right.
And in fact, it can be really counterproductive to say that in the beginning if it's not really what you believe and feel.
Right.
So yeah, I totally appreciate that. It was kind of the same way. At a certain point, I always say it was probably around a year where I was just really clear that I could now really take it or leave it. I was really free from it. It was small and irrelevant in my life. But then I was like, why would I take it?
Why would I go back?
It doesn't serve me. And also I'm potentially putting at risk this really pretty incredible life that I've created for myself that doesn't involve alcohol. And it wasn't just about not drinking and the obvious benefits of not drinking. It was about all of these intangible benefits that I didn't expect to happen. And all of these things that were happening in terms of personal growth, including around my business and coaching and focus, but also my relationships and, my marriage and some of these kind of dreams I had for myself that had just sort of been muted, I think, by the drinking over the period.
Yeah, totally. I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to, you stopped drinking, you did all of this work, and at some point you started to feel like this was where you wanted to be and you probably weren't going to drink again, which is amazing. And let's talk a little bit about how that played out now. Let's go back, because this is so interesting for me. I didn't know you had all of this social stuff going on in the UK. I think that's so interesting. And so you're kind of like a little mini celebrity there. So I am curious, because you obviously, for many women who are listening to this podcast, they're navigating kind of a typical social life and they're really stressed about that and how they're going to do that alcohol free. But you have all of this extra social stuff going on, probably a bigger social world in many ways. And it sounds like probably like a little bit more of a lens on you publicly in terms of what you're doing. So how'd that play out for you? What was your first event post-pandemic, if we can even say post-pandemic? I don't know if we can say that yet.
Oh my gosh, I know. Oh my gosh.
How did it go?
It's well, I think so basically kind of the way that I fell into this like quote unquote social scene, I guess, is when I moved over to the UK, I started a blog called An American Girl in Chelsea. And it was basically for expat women to like navigate moving over here. And so it was like everything from like where to what doctor you should have your baby with, because that's a whole thing. And to which like, clubs to join and all this other stuff, which I thought was really, really important at the time. Now I'm just like, wow. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And with that, I kind of gathered this like small, but like very loyal Instagram following. And so I started documenting the sobriety journey on there. Like after I kind of found my feed, I was, in COVID, there was no one to talk to about this. And as I mentioned, like I was nervous to tell friends and I didn't have a community and there was like no meetings I could go to. And I didn't really know about the online community. And I'll say this right now, if I knew I could have hired a coach, I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Me
but
too.
I just didn't know. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons. It's actually one of the main reasons I got certified is because when I was doing it, I felt so completely isolated and alone. And there was not 4.5 years ago, this online community was not available. And for me personally, AA was not something that I felt was accessible for me. I was not going to go to an AA meeting. And I've said this many times on the podcast, if AA got you sober and you love AA, I'm so excited and happy for you. And it works so well for so many people. But for me, it just didn't really feel like the right fit. And
same.
So none of that stuff was available. So I totally get all that when you're saying that. So, okay. So you're blogging about this. And what's your Instagram? Tell everybody what your Instagram page is now, because we're talking about it.
Yeah. So I wasn't blogging about it. I was doing a lot of like Instagram, like stories, like, hey, I've decided like I'm doing this. And then like, a really sweet girlfriend, when she found out I wasn't drinking and had hit 3 months, sent me like a chip. So I like posted it and it was just like, whoosh, the comments, right? Because everyone's at home watching social media. No one can go anywhere. And they're like, how are you doing this? How do you feel? Like, are you losing weight? How's your skin? Can you sleep? Da, 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 da. And I was like, holy guacamole. Like, this is a thing. Like, people want to know. Right. So then it was like, I was storing about like my first kind of like dinner out and my first, weekend away and when we were allowed and all this stuff. And it was just, I had people from elementary school that I hadn't literally talked to since, I'm not joking, the second grade, reach out to me, people from all of the like, seasons of my life reach out and ask questions and how do I help my husband? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I meant to do. this is what I am meant to do. I am meant to help people. And so, and then of course, like, as you know, as luck would have it, I get Scott's email. Would you like to apply for certification? And I was like, yes, I would.
So here's a question for you on that point, Christy, because I get this question. I mean, I was, I don't know, I can't remember when I started the certification, maybe I was like a couple years alcohol free at that time. But a lot of people end up doing that certification through This Naked Mind. And it hasn't been that long since they've been alcohol free.
Yeah.
And I often get like, and I had my own questions about it. I'll be honest, when I did my certification, because there were a number of women in that program who I became friends with who were really quite newly alcohol free. And I think people question that. But can you explain, because I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. Why is it that you felt like you were ready to do that certification and actually help other people, even though it was, relatively early days in your sobriety at that point?
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, we call them, as you know, like energy snacks within the This Naked Mind community. And like when my first day of the first immersion event, that was the one, the top of my piece of paper was, I have not been alcohol free long enough. And obviously I've done a lot of work on that, but I think it is so, it's so important to have someone that's kind of is fresh in it, right?
Yeah.
And does remember, like, it is not that long ago that I remember the things that I had to forgive myself for. And it is not that long ago that I, really got deep into figuring out how to get out, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I understand the reason it comes up as a question. I just feel like the part of the best reasons to have a coach is someone that's gone through it. And if it's like fresh for them, it can be a real asset. And for me too, like, I didn't see, this was before I got like really engrossed and started meeting everyone. I didn't see people like me out there talking about it either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so I was like, I don't have anybody like in my circle of friends that would ever even talk about this. So I want to talk about it.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I also think when and this is this is the piece that's often missing from this conversation. And I felt it very strongly and clearly quite early on in this. And I don't know if I think it's probably connected to the underlying approach that This Naked Mind takes and what we're working on and the way we're looking at the problem, which is really, for me, was all about looking at it through the lens of like what might be available to me without alcohol in my life instead of what will not be available to me without alcohol in my life. And so for me, I got to a point where I didn't say it out loud because it felt too soon to say it out loud to anyone else. And I wasn't really even sure it mattered to anyone else, but I was pretty clear on it after about 6 months that I probably was never going to want to drink again. And that this was actually the best thing I'd ever done for myself. And I think that happens a lot. And the timeline on that is different for everybody. And we talk a lot in This Naked Mind about this whole timeline, this progression from fixation with alcohol to liberation with alcohol, and how in the beginning, alcohol's running the show. It's consuming all your thoughts. You feel like it needs to be a part of every single piece of your life because it has been for so long. And you have all these beliefs and thoughts around alcohol that are signaling to your brain that it needs to have this thing. But as you do the work and, read and learn and talk and, all of the things that we advocate as part of the process of becoming alcohol free, you start an experiment, really. That's the biggest piece of it. You start to live your life alcohol free, just fully in curiosity and self-compassion. What ends up happening is you start moving away from that place of fixation, and you feel that the liberation and the freedom from it coming. And that happens, that tipping point on that spectrum, in my experience coaching now, in this area for a couple of years, almost exclusively, and my own personal experience, that tipping point happens at a completely different time for everybody. 100%. And I have women I work with for whom it happens at a year, and I have women I've worked with for whom it happens at like 2 or 3 months. Yeah. So I think that's probably, I don't know if that was part of it for you. I'm guessing it was just getting to that point where it was like, I just know, like, this is the right thing for me. And I feel very committed and secure and confident in this, even though you're probably still having moments in the early days, like I was, where you're still having cravings, you're still having urges, you're still, having to work your way through tough social situations where you're not drinking, but there's this underlying feeling of this matters. Being alcohol free matters more to me than drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does
And
that
you
resonate?
can feel, yeah, totally. And you can feel that you definitely know when that shift, right, happens into liberation. And that is, I mean, I say it all the time, like, I didn't even think that this was possible to be able to go out and like be at a dinner table where you're at a dinner table with 15 girlfriends and every single person's drinking. You just literally don't even have a desire. Like, what? Like, that's crazy, right? Like, and so I think when you feel that, like, you know that you can help other people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that, because I said we were going to come back to it. So how did you navigate that? What did you tell people? What were your fears around starting to socialize again?
Yeah, no. So it was, I mean, it was like very slow. So I remember the first one was a barbecue, and I did the thing. I was actually just talking about this with Sam, coach from This Naked Mind, the other day. And it was like, I did it all wrong. I came and I was like, you're all gonna die, and like it's so bad for you, and you really shouldn't be drinking this, and da 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 da. I mean, I didn't go that far, but I definitely was like defensive, and I was like, I think one of my girlfriends started with, I asked for a Diet Coke, and they're like, well, that's worse for you than like this glass of rosé. And I was like, let me just tell you everything that I know, which, as we know now, is not the best approach. So obviously I had to find my feet a little, 100% had to find my feet and navigate it, and just end up just like living my life happy. And with, as you and I have talked about, tons of boundaries. I learned that I am not an extrovert. I am an introvert. I recharge alone. And I like my sleep. Now that I was getting 8 hours of quality sleep after probably decades of not getting it, I don't want to compromise that, Right. So like if I'm going out, like I will probably be the first one to leave, but you got I got the best part of the night, the first couple hours, and you're not going to remember anything probably after I've left anyways. So it was just finding that. And I think there's so much to be said for, as the days go by and the months go by, your confidence increases, right? Like, and you go from being like stumbling over those ways to just being like, no, I'll have a sparkling water. And there you have so much confidence in it that I think other people can feel it too, know? And so then you go from putting people off to opening a door for them to actually ask questions. Yeah. And so it went from me petrified to another girlfriend, like she stopped and she's, decided to give up alcohol for the foreseeable future. And having so many people be interested in my story, and the people that I thought were going to be judgmental did show up for me, and the ones that didn't, like, I'm sure you experienced this too. There's a shift in friendships, and where that's something that we can get really caught up and be fearful of, it ends up being such a blessing because you find your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for, I definitely experienced some shifting in some friendships, and in some cases it was just a sign that there wasn't an awful lot else there between us other than the alcohol component and drinking. But for others, it was a sign that there was more there beneath it all, and that it was hard for that person that I wasn't drinking and they still were. So, that can be part of it as well. And I think you have to, I've really tried to do this, just kind of give yourself grace, but give the person the same amount of grace, and just remember, like, when you were talking about how when your friend was trying to take a break and you were like, no, stop it. Don't be dumb. Let's not take a break. Like, I did the same thing, right? It doesn't feel good when someone is ahead of you on a personal growth journey. And I mean, just chronologically ahead of you, like, is taking steps that you're feeling like they might be the right steps for you, but you're not ready to take them, or you don't know how to take them. And so I think that's part of this whole thing too with friendships, but absolutely. Then you end up finding your people. I mean, what a absolute gift it was for me to get certified, because I was completely alone. I did not know one person who didn't drink for the reasons I didn't drink. Yeah. There was nobody, like when you said you didn't know anybody like you, I didn't know anyone like me. I knew some people who were, who had really big adverse effects as a result of their drinking, who had quit drinking. Not very many, but I knew a couple. But I didn't know anyone who would fall into my category of gray area drinking. In fact, a lot of the people in my life were like, what? Why are you not drinking anymore? And so it was just so wonderful to be with a group of people where there was no judgment around any of that. And they were all just super genuinely excited about the fact that I had found freedom from alcohol, So I love that community, and I've made so many great friends through it. And I know you're going to continue to make them as you go, just as I have. And I also I just wanted to go back. I loved that point that you made about how you get more confident. As you get more confident, it becomes less of an issue in the situation. Yeah. I've certainly found that when I go out now, I mean, I'm the person who really does all the things. Like, I don't say no to anything except maybe like a wine tour. I might say no to that, but like, I pretty much will do. And my friends get that. If I say no to that, but I pretty much do all the things. I still go to parties and socialize, and I'm up for anything, I'm going salsa dancing this weekend. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
But, I think, one of the things that I've learned is that the very best way for me to show up is to show up as myself, having fun, alcohol free, in terms of 100%. Having an impact on anyone else. I don't talk about it. I don't tell people I'm alcohol free. I mean, if someone asks me questions about it, I'll answer honestly, but I do always make it about me. And if someone asks me now why I don't drink, I'll just say, oh, I'm just way happier without alcohol. Like I'm happier person without alcohol. But showing up at these things and just having a really great time and doing all the things that the people who are drinking are doing is, I think, the best way to influence other people to maybe take a break or take a look at their own drinking and not get too judgy around it, and just just have some hope that maybe it's not all doom and gloom if you take a break from it. So I love that you said that, because I found exactly the same thing. And also, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Like, you think everybody cares, and
everybody cares.
You're the center of everything, and everyone cares, and really no one cares. So do you still go to all of these events and you just go alcohol free?
Yeah. So I was going to say, I mentioned, I'm probably the first one to go home, but I still do all the things, right? Yeah. Like, I've still traveled, I've danced on a table, I've done karaoke, all alcohol free. Like, having fun without alcohol is a belief that I had to work on, but I can tell you it is just the best. Right. So I do all the things, and the world is slowly opening. So all these things I was worried about summer of 2020, I'm going to be doing this summer for the first time alcohol free. So that will be really fun. But I think there's a lot to be said, right? For when you are going through this journey, there are so many firsts, right? Mm-hmm. So going on your first sober vacation, / holiday, isn't just about it's about the airport. You know what I mean? The airport lounge and the airplane ride. And so all those little things, there's so many firsts, and there's still firsts that I'm having now, people that I haven't seen because of the pandemic, or things I haven't done. And I'm oh, okay, this is going to be the first time. Mm-hmm. But as we talk about so much, it's about dropping any negative expectation and just going into it with the lens of wait a minute, this could be so much better, not fuzzy and not dulled down and not with a headache.
Yeah. Exactly.
And it is.
If you can't get yourself there, I always say to clients, if you can't get yourself to positivity, at the very least, get yourself to neutrality around it, which is, I actually don't know how this is going to go.
Right.
Because you really legitimately don't. And even that makes it more likely that it's going to go well. If you're going into it with the assumption it's going to be really tough and really hard and suck and, be not very much fun and all the rest of it, then it's probably not going to be very much fun. That's the truth of it. So the lens really does matter. Can we talk a little bit about mummy wine culture? Because I know that was a piece of all of this for you. And is that something that's kind of alive and well in the UK? Like, it's alive and well here? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the first time that I really saw it for what it was is during the pandemic, Tropicana. I don't know if you saw this.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've talked about it on here before, but that was when I was woo. So it was a bunch of models / actresses and an actor. And they were basically all over social media, hiding in their bathrooms or in their garages, drinking a mimosa with champagne and Tropicana, hiding from their children during the pandemic because they needed a mommy me moment. Mm-hmm. And I was just remember seeing it I would have totally bought into that, thought it was funny and cute before. And now I'm just this is so dangerous, because I remember in reality, like here you have, beautiful Molly Sims, like hiding from her kids. What it really looks like is not pretty, right? When you're hiding from your kids, trying to drink and ignoring bedtime stories and not doing homework with them and completely, just putting yourself before them. It doesn't look like this funny moment. And so that's when I first like saw it on the flip side.
Yeah.
And then of course, I was given all that merchandise, like mommy, baby wines. So mommy wines, WHWINES, like all that stuff. And it is so prevalent. I mean, you go to stationery shops here and it's almost like every Mother's Day card, and Father's Day too, but Mother's Day card is about like, you deserve it, with a gin bottle or a pink bottle of whatever, champagne. And so it's just, I think the reason that it strikes such a chord with me is because my kids are now 12 and 10. And so they're old enough where they've seen this transition, as I was locked in a house with them. And I noticed that they noticed, right? Yeah. So much more than I gave them credit for. Yeah. So much more. Like my son, like noticed that I was like not present on weekends. And I've, had these conversations. And so that broke my heart. Right. And so when I realized that like making light of like dulling ourselves out, numbing ourselves out to deal with them is something, it's a message that we're sending to our kids, that it's just, it made me sad. That's like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I remember thinking that I remember thinking, what is the message? I didn't think it, unfortunately, until after I'd stopped drinking, but
yeah, me too.
What kind of a message is this sending to our kids, that they're so hard to deal with and manage? Yeah. We need to use a drug. And the other piece of it that enrages me, and I'm not even a closet feminist anymore. I don't even give a shit anymore. Yeah. But the thing that really enrages me about it is that this messaging is directed at women, and it is not directed at men. So yeah, there's lots of advertising out there around alcohol for men, obviously, but it's not this type of messaging. It's not, you need this to cope or deal or actually just show up as a worthwhile human. It's, you need this to have fun at the game or with your buddies or whatever, or to, relax, maybe like as part of a celebration, or not even relaxation for men, really. They don't market it that way. It's like, have this scotch because you're amazing and you're so good at what you do. Right. Like, but for women, there's such a directed messaging, line of messaging around, you need this to cope and just to be. And that enrages me because it's so sexist and horrible. And of course, just like every industry right now, the alcohol industry is largely run by men. And like, anyway, so I could go on about that for forever, but everything about this movement, I'm putting that in air quotes, it's not really a movement, this directed, targeted line of advertising and marketing around alcohol for women makes me really, really mad. It's the opposite of empowerment. It's just disempowerment for women. And unfortunately, they market it in such a way that it's really attractive. And you see people like that Tropicana campaign, where these women are looking absolutely amazing while they drink their mimosas in the morning without their children. And I'm thinking, first of all, obviously no one has a fridge in their bathroom, but also the wine's being hidden behind the toilet for most of the women that I work with, or, in the back of the vanity, underneath the closet, behind the toilet paper. And they're drinking it out of the bottle in between crying, and overwhelmed with their kids. Like it looks nothing like it looks like in the marketing. And anyway, it just makes me really angry. So I'm always keen to raise this topic one more time. I've talked about this a lot with Emily Lynn Paulson, who you probably know, who is really quite active. She's a fellow coach of ours, and I coach some programming with her. She talks about this a lot, and a lot more than I do, because I'm sort of out of it. My kids are 18 now. And so I'm out of it, but it still makes me really mad. And a lot of my clients are very influenced by it. Of course, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's like, it's so cunning and, crafty, and,
And the sad thing too is like, it's obviously coming from big alcohol. We know this, but the sad thing too is that we're doing it to each other. You know what I mean? When we post that like silly card or whatever, like, you know, water bottle that says this is gin, like when we do that stuff, like we're pushing that message on each other. And I think, you know, in a lot of ways, that's even more harmful, right? Like you saw in the pandemic, you know, I saw on friends' Instagram stuff where the wine aisle in grocery stores said like homeschool supplies. And isn't this so funny? Yeah. And I was just like, we're doing it like, yeah, they put that billboard there, but you've now just made it okay with everybody looking, you know? Yeah. And so that's the thing that also is sad. It's like, we're doing it to each other.
Totally. And what we really need is some fucking help.
Yeah.
So if this is what makes me the maddest, it's like, no, what we actually need is for you to step up here. That's what we need. We need some help. We need some recognition. We need some understanding here. We need some support in figuring out how to actually set the boundaries, say no, actually provide ourselves with some meaningful self-care, which by the way, is not a bottle of wine at the end of the day. And I do want to be really clear, and I'm sure you feel this way too, Christy. There's zero judgment when we're talking about women who do this, because I did it. I did it for years. I did it until I realized, oh my gosh, this is not okay. It's not okay that I'm doing this, you know, and while it might, to some people in my feed, it might still feel funny. To a lot of people in my feed, it probably doesn't feel funny anymore. And it's actually, for everyone in my feed, it's influencing them, whether they know it is or not. It's making, it's sending this message that I'm not cool with, which is you're not capable of doing this without booze.
Right.
And you are capable of doing it, but you also need some freaking help. And that's okay. And it's okay to ask for that and try to get that. And, you know, all of what goes along with that.
Well, and also it's like, you know, we say we need it to cope and everything that you just said, but it's also like, you're just making it so much harder. I was just making it so much harder on myself by using this. You know, who can show up as a great mom when you like haven't slept, not because of the baby, but because you're waking up at 3 a.m. because of drinking, you know, and being exhausted, and you're just, it's self-sabotaging too. So it's like, of course, like you can't show up 100%. You're just, so when I saw it that way too, I was just like, yeah, wow. This is crazy. This is
absolutely. Yeah. All of that for sure. Okay. Really quick. Just want to ask the question that the other question everyone wants to know, which is, was there something that really, that happened that made you realize I need to change this thing? There wasn't for me. So I just want to be clear about that. Again, there wasn't for me. It was not, I did not have what people would kind of classically characterized as a rock bottom, but that question gets asked a lot because I think a lot of women are waiting for it.
Yeah.
And it keeps them stuck in drinking for longer than they need to. So, but I'm just curious as to whether that happened for you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a rock bottom at all. It was, I could have kept going like that for sure. It was that day, you know, like I mentioned, like it was the anniversary of my mom's death. And I was just like sitting there, like kind of like looking at how I had been and how it looked so different than how I felt. And I just didn't feel good. And I didn't want to feel like that anymore. And I certainly didn't want to feel worse a year on, you know? So it wasn't like, there wasn't a massive thing at all. It was just like, okay, I don't feel good. And I don't want to keep going like this. You know, it wasn't. Yeah.
No, same with me. It was kind of like this moment where I always call it my not this moment, where I was sitting in a chair and I was drinking and I just had this, I was by myself. I mean, there probably were people in the house. I can't remember. Maybe not. I drank sometimes by myself too, but when there was no one home. But I just remember distinctly sitting, and I know exactly where I was sitting. I know where my arm was like positioned on the chair. I can remember the moment really, really clearly, where I just thought, I don't even know if I like this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, why am I doing this? I don't even know if I like this. Now I kept drinking. Don't get me wrong. I kept drinking because I was totally dependent on it. But there was a moment where I just thought, this is not actually what I want anymore. And I just remember thinking like, not this. I don't know what the alternative is, but it's not this. I can't keep doing this. Even though I absolutely could have physically kept doing it. And there really was no rock bottom. mine was just really different. And I had a lot of stuff going on in my life at that time. It felt like it was the right time for me to figure this thing out and try to get more present with my life, which alcohol was making impossible. But yeah, there was no rock bottom for me either. And I think it's important for people to understand that that's absolutely not necessary. And in fact, wouldn't it be better to get off the train before it crashes? Like, it's only going in one direction. This is the thing we know about alcohol, right? And it's not it's not your fault. It's the substance. It's the nature of the substance. Like sometimes you hear people say in like the recovery world, which is not a word I really use very much. I prefer discovery, but people talk about this idea of the elevator only goes one way and it just goes down, right? It's like the train that you're on, if it doesn't feel good now, it's not going to get better on its own. That's the truth of it. Your tolerance is just going to continue to grow. Life's going to continue to be lifey. You're going to rely on it more and more, and you're going to need more of it to feel the way that it makes you, like a smaller amount makes you feel now.
Right.
So if this is something that you recognize is not serving you, then don't wait. That's my advice. If you're listening, don't wait, because as Christy's saying, and that's why I love having other alcohol-free women on the podcast, is because people hear me say this all the time, Christy, and they're probably sick of it. I talk about, oh my gosh, my life is so great. I'm so happy, alcohol-free. And they're like, okay, Wendy, enough.
We get it.
It's nice to have other women so that, there's some variety here in terms of the evidence that I'm trying to put out there, that life alcohol-free actually is more fun. It's more relaxing. It's just generally way more joyful than life with alcohol ever was for me.
Yeah. And to your point too, like I'll say, not only was there not a rock bottom, but I've actually had multiple friends, I think at like 2 or 3, say, but everything looked fine. Like, what do you mean? Like, did you think? I had one mom at the school gates, wait a minute, do you think you had a problem? Like, what does a problem even mean? I don't even know what that means. I just feel better. But I had several people, and one lady say to me, a girlfriend was like, but everything looks so great on Instagram and so pretty. Why stop? Like, it's like, I can still do all that stuff. I just not gonna numb myself out while I'm doing it.
Yeah, it's so great. And I really want to commend you for recognizing that your feed was influencing people in a disingenuine way. If that's the right way to put it, because I think, this is one I write about this idea. Like I've written about this. No one's read it, by the way. I've just written about it. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, you can go find this thing I wrote, because you can't right now. You can't find it anywhere. But I've been writing about this. And one of the things I wrote about was the fact that I did exactly what all women did, which was fall into this trap of trying to replicate these impossibly aspirational moments that I saw on Facebook and Instagram. And I thought those things were actually possible. Yeah. And they're not. And so I always applaud people like you or Emily and Lynn Paulson, who wrote, her book is called Highlight Reel. It's really about how she was just posting the highlights of her life. And by all accounts on social media, it looked like she had her shit entirely together. And that just was so not what was happening in real life. And I think it's really important for us to be honest in social media. I think we have a responsibility to other women to be honest about our lives. You don't need to put all the awful stuff out there. I'm not saying that. I'm not even really a huge fan of social media and sharing, but if you're putting it out there, at the very least, be honest about it. Be honest about it. And I do think that I really have a special spot in my heart for anybody who's willing to go out there and be vulnerable about it, and come on my podcast and just talk about the fact that this is actually really kind of crappy, and that it is, and that life is not always easy and everybody's struggling with all the same things. So I so appreciate your openness today, Christy. This has been, I knew it was going to be like an easy conversation. So, and it's been so great getting to know a little bit more about you. I don't know if you ever shared your Instagram, so can you share that?
Yeah. So it's at Love Life Sober with Christy, Christy. And the website is lovelifesober.co.uk.
Okay, I'll put those in the show notes so people can find them there too. And then is there anything you're working on right now, or anything you've got going that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. So I do one-on-one coaching. I haven't ever done group yet. So I love that. So obviously all the information is on my website for free discovery call and all that stuff. Love one-on-one. I mean, I just, as you experienced too, like helping other people is just the absolute best. And then, yeah, I mean, I haven't told anybody this yet, but especially for the people that live in these walls, I'm working on a 30-day devotional with a kind of like freedom from alcohol spin on it. So I came to that because I was obviously reading all the books that we talked about in the beginning, but for me as a Christian lady, I also was reading devotionals to support myself as well. And I found when I had a Christian client, I would kind of like offer both. I'm like, oh, you should be reading The Alcohol Experiment, but also like this is a really good one for encouragement as well. So I'm working on kind of putting the practical coaching support and biblical encouragement together. And I just actually finished proofreading my proposal this morning. So
so excited.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Good for you. And this is like another thing that I love about this world is that there are so many different paths to becoming alcohol free and so many different, so much variety in terms of the support that's out there and available for people. And everybody needs and wants different types of support. And I love that about this, particularly the This Naked Mind community. We have such a variety of coaches with different backgrounds and different paths to their own, freedom from alcohol. And I love this because this is not something that I could ever offer anybody. And I just think I was actually going to ask you what a devotional is, but I think you explained it. That's how what's the word? Secular, whatever. No, I don't know what the word is. I am. But I appreciate that. And I can see how this could be a really, really helpful tool for someone for whom their Christian faith is a part of their, is a big part of their life.
Watch this space. The ink has just dried on the proposal, so we still have a ways to go, but I'm really excited about it because I don't think it's been done this way yet. And I think for someone like it could be really helpful and encouraging. Yeah.
That's so great. It's so great, Christy. Okay. So I will share Christy's information in the show notes if you're interested in learning more about her or following her on Instagram. But Christy, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation and maybe we can do another one on season 3.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much, Wendy. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.